Hi, my name is Tori Atia.
And my name is Brooke Sender, and today we're going to be talking to you guys about a strategy called CHAMPS.
CHAMPS is a proactive and positive approach to classroom management. The second edition of CHAMPS assists classroom teachers to create a proactive and positive approach to classroom management that will teach students how to behave responsibly. The overall goal of CHAMPS is that no students fall behind in the classroom. By implementing the strategies, teachers will notice reduce classroom disruptions and office referrals, improve classroom climate, increase student on-task behavior, establishing respectful and civil interactions. And as a result of following the research-based practices outlined in CHAMPS, teachers are able to create effective methods for clearly communicating their expectations on every classroom activity and transition.
So we're going to talk to you guys a little bit about the acronym CHAMPS, C-H-A-M-P-S. Each letter stands for a part of the classroom management strategy. So we're going to start with C, which is conversation. During the conversation part, teachers can ask themselves, can students converse during this activity? What are they conversing about? With who? For how long? So this is really important because students learn really well off one another, and at this time, teachers also need to think about how they're grouping students, who can learn the most from one another, and things like that.
And just like building off that, it can also be like classroom discussions. Teachers can have like whole group discussions or split students into groups. So it's just like any way to really get students talking and discussing with one another. And next we have H, which stands for help. And it's how do students get your attention for help? Or how do students get questions answered? Or what should they do while they wait for you? And an example that I've learned about that is pretty effective that teachers can use that kind of follows these guidelines are having red, yellow, and green cups, and you can stack them all on top of each other, and each group or table partners or whoever, students, however they're paired, they'll get a stack of 3 cups, and if students are good to go, don't need any help, or don't have any questions, they put their green cup on top, and that's just a way for the teacher to know that, the students are good working on their own and they don't need the teacher to help out. And if students are a little confused, there's still a bit of work, but want some help and guidance, they can put the yellow one on top, and this is a way if teachers notice that, they can walk around and help students when they get time. And then there's red, where students are completely lost and stuck and have no idea like really what they're doing, and that kind of tells the teacher like she needs to help them immediately because they're not really making any progress. So this is just a way to make sure you're helping students, and CHAMPS really emphasizes on just having like students, letting them know that they can receive help and that the teacher is there to help them, or also learning from each other. And like Brooke said earlier, like pairing students together that work well together, or students who can build off each other and help each other get through assignments.
So next we have A, and A stands for activity, and some things that we can think about as teachers in this section is what is the expected end product of this activity and what is the actual task or objective. So as teachers, it's very important for us to set expectations for our students and make them aware of our expectations, because a lot of the times if students don't know what we expect from them, they won't work as hard as if we set in high expectation. So this is really important in CHAMPS because the students need to know what we believe they can do, and then they can live up to that.
The next letter is M, which stands for movement. And some questions that teachers can ask themselves are, for what reasons can students get out of their seats during this activity, or also do they need permission to do so? And this is something that CHAMPS suggests teachers do at the beginning of the activity and kind of set a standard, like letting students know if it's okay for them to get up and move around or talk to different peers, or if this is an activity that students, are being asked to sit in their seat. But they really encourage that students do have the ability to move around because it just helps them just kind of regroup and focus on what they're learning. So maybe just having set times where maybe students like do rotations or move from seat to seat, just so they'll be able to get out of their seat. Or if just anytime in lesson you're okay with students getting up and just taking a break, just letting them know, or if there's like a hand signal or anything like that, that maybe like thumbs up means that they want to get up, and teachers like allow that. So just having like a set guidelines and procedure at the beginning of the activity so students know what is expected. And this helps behavior because it limits students from just getting up and running around the classroom and the teacher just thinking they're not paying attention or doing what they're asked. So it really helps everyone stay focused.
Okay, next is P, which stands for participation. In this section, we're going to look for what behaviors are showing that the students are participating or not participating. So this is important because obviously our goal as teachers is to have all of our students participate. And this classroom management strategy really looks at, students may be participating in their own way. They may not always be the chief. They may be the Indian, and that's okay. You'll get to know your students and you'll know how their participation is, and if it's lacking, you can find new ways to get them to participate accordingly and really get the most out of the lesson.
And lastly, S stands for success. And there's really no questions for this one. It's basically just if teachers are able to implement all of these steps, that the success of students will increase drastically. And so just making sure to follow each of these steps and students' behavior should increase.
Okay, so next we're going to talk about some of the benefits of CHAMPS as classroom management strategy. First of them being that teachers can establish clear expectations with logical and fair responses to misbehavior. So we talked about expectations earlier. It's very important, obviously, for teachers to set those expectations because students will know how they're expected to behave. And if not, it's also very important for teachers to implement logical consequences because this has been shown to be the most effective way for students to really change the behavior. Another benefit of CHAMPS is that teachers spend less time disciplining and more time teaching, which is also very important because when students know how they should be behaving, it's not taking away from classroom time or distracting other students, and the teacher doesn't have to put his attention on that student, which takes away from instruction. Another benefit is that teachers learn tools to motivate students to do their best, which is very important in the classroom. Students aren't going to always be motivated on their own, and as teachers, good classroom management will really show them, what they need to do to succeed. And lastly, students are taught how to behave responsibly, and this will carry through them throughout life, and that's why it's so important to teach them this because if they're not behaving responsibly, it just takes away so much time in the classroom. It really affects the other students as well.
And building on Brooke, one thing I really liked and thought it was a huge benefit was that it's not a set of rules that students are just expected to follow in the classroom. Don't do this, don't. It's more just ways that teachers can alter the way they teach that automatically helps students' behavior. And so they're not having to sit there and criticize and get mad at students and discipline them constantly. It's more just something that if teachers try this and students respond well to it, it just creates an overall better classroom environment.
Okay, and also we found for the most part that CHAMPS had more pros than cons, but when we were looking at closer, we found some ways that could be cons. So the CHAMPS strategy may be difficult for teachers to implement if they're not extremely organized or have not put in a lot of prior work into the strategy, such as making charts to record student behaviors or setting clear expectations even before implementing this, or previously setting smooth transitions. So basically, the con that we saw is that this strategy won't magically give teachers amazing classroom management, but it will really build on already strong classroom management and make it even stronger. So it's just really important that teachers already have a set classroom management that the students are aware of.
Yeah, and it's pretty hefty. It's a big, a lot of things for teachers to kind of follow and keep in mind. So if teachers really don't have the time, from the beginning of the year to implement it, it probably wouldn't be the most effective. It's something they really have to, sit down and, weave into their, everyday instruction. So on your screen now are some examples of CHAMPS worksheets that teachers can use as a guideline to kind of reference to during activities and while transitioning in the classroom. And just briefly, CHAMPS is when you order online, it costs $50, which seems a little pricey, but that does come with one CD and also a book that is 520 pages. So there is so much information and just some examples to help you kind of have a better understanding of what CHAMPS is. This first worksheet that is on your screen is a classroom activity worksheet. And this is kind of just what teachers can follow through that has the acronym for CHAMPS, just each step of the way. So they have questions and kind of things to keep in mind. So first, we have conversation, and can students engage in conversations with each other during this activity? If yes, about what and with whom, and how students can be involved in a single conversation, and how long can the conversation last? And so this is also a way for a teacher to reflect as they're going through assignments or activities, so then they can refer to it later and kind of see what worked well or not. And also, as you can see on the right hand side, it has a spot for voice level and what they want students, how they want their voice level to be at, and just letting them know that before the activity begins. And next is help, and how do students get questions answered? How do students get your attention? If students have to wait for help, what do they do while they wait? And this is kind of like we talked about earlier. You can do different little ways that students know how to get the teacher's attention, but just kind of having those set in stone before the activity. And it's also really beneficial to have an idea of what students should be doing while they're waiting, instead of just holding their hand up for a few minutes, because it may be a while until you can get around to them. And next we have activity. What is the expected end product of this activity? And I know Brooke talked about this earlier. This can be different from day to day, and just kind of writing it out before on this worksheet so and you're able to communicate with that with your students. And next we have movement. Kind of like we talked about earlier, it's can students get up during the activity out of their seats. And then also on this worksheet, as you can see, it says if yes, acceptable reasons include, and listing those out, I believe, is really helpful. So you can kind of check on here ones that are okay with students or any others you would like to add. And then also, do they need permission from you, which is I feel like key, because you can tell students they can do all these things and they're all going to get but once. So just also having a procedure for if it's only one at a time, or if they need to raise their hand or give you some signal, or if it's just free for all, just kind of having that mapped out before. And lastly, we have participation. What behaviors show that students are participating fully and responsibly? What behaviors show that students are not participating? Which I believe that is also huge. What ways that you can notice, because there may be those few students who are constantly raising their hand and being engaged, and sometimes the ones that are not participating all kind of slip through the cracks. So just making sure that you have ways prepared for those students as well. And like we mentioned earlier, all this will lead to student success. And the next worksheet that should be popped up on the screen now is a transition worksheet. And this is something I really, really liked about CHAMPS, was because I feel like you can have all these set procedures and ideas on how to keep students' behavior good just during an activity, but when you're moving from one thing to the next, which happens often in all classrooms, it's good to have a set list of things to do. And then so going through CHAMPS again, and how it kind of differs is conversations. Can students engage in conversation with each other during the transition, along with the voice level again? Is that going to be higher than it was during the activity? If yes, clarify how, if students can talk to each other, just kind of tell them, is it need to be about the work they've been doing, or is this kind of a little break for them? Just kind of setting those boundaries. And with help, how students get questions answered, how do students get your attention? Pretty much the same. Activity, explain the transition, what will be different afterward, change in location, use different materials, include time criteria, how long it should take. Just giving students an idea of all these things is really helpful, because once students are done for one thing, they think they're checked out, but just kind of already telling them what the plan is next is very helpful. Next we have movement. If the transition itself does not involve getting out of the seats, can students get out of their seat for any reason during the transition? If yes, what are acceptable reasons? Because we all know that, when one thing's over, all students want to get up and take a break. So just kind of, if you don't have time for that, make sure that is addressed. And if the transition itself involves out-of-seat movement, can students go elsewhere, like to sharpen a pencil or use the restroom or get water? And then we have participation. What behaviors show that students are participating in the transition fully and responsibly? And what behaviors show that a student is not participating appropriately in the transition? And once again, this should all lead to success. And I think that these little worksheets, they map it out really well for teachers. just to kind of follow, because, you can think about all these things, but when it comes down to it, asking yourself the questions, it's easy to forget. So kind of having these during each activity or transition can be really helpful. And this is just an idea of many of the helpful sheets that Champs has if you were to buy the product.
So after learning about the Champs classroom management strategy, Tori and I both really felt like this is something that we could implement in our future classrooms, especially like our first year of teaching. It's like very specific about what it wants, and it also leaves room for you to kind of put your own twist on it as a teacher, and we really could see it benefiting our students' behaviors and keeping them on task, and also helping us create lessons that are more engaging and setting high expectations for our future students.
And also, being first-year teachers, it's really helpful for us to have something to kind of guide us, like not coming in like blindsided in how to create our own classroom management and to keep students disciplined. And so it's kind of really good for teachers that are just starting out to kind of weave into their instruction, and also special education teachers. It really does have like a clear cut of what we should be doing that would help all students and all learners. So it's very beneficial.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you.